Reading 66 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 3. Great Animal House, February 15th, 1947. Note on taking in negative impressions. When you take in a negative impression, it increases second force in you. You can say simply that it makes everything more difficult. People often make difficulties about everything. In fact, making difficulties may belong to their chief feature. Every person has a chief feature on which everything rests. It is compared with a central axle round which everything in the man or woman turns. When a person tries to forget himself and only remember what his aim is, chief feature interferes. In every decision, chief feature decides. In short, in regard to changing oneself, changing one's being, it constitutes the greatest second force in us. Every manifestation is the meeting point of three forces: first, second, and third force. First force is called active, and second force is force of resistance to active force, or opposing force. This second force is in all things, even in the imagination and fantasy, where at least we might suppose we can do as we like. But for this force of resistance, everything would be without restraint, without brakes, without the necessity of effort, without form. But to say this is absurd, for nothing that exists, nothing that manifests itself, is without second force. Now, when a man makes as his aim change of himself, his chief feature stands up as second force to resist him. But people do not see that they have second force in themselves. They see it always as outside themselves. Let us return to the opening remark. I said that when you take in a negative impression, it increases second force. Let us try to see why this is so, and how, as a result, it can hold people back in the work, without their realizing what it is that does this. I mean that a person in this work, the object of which is increase of consciousness, and so change of being, cannot proceed beyond a certain point unless they halt negative impressions of others. In the first place, taking in and accepting negative impressions of others, of life, of everything, feeds the negative part of emotional center. This part of emotional center has to be starved because it is like a disease in the emotional center. The emotional center, if a man or woman works against this acquired part, can transmit meaning from higher emotional center. You can call it inspiration, meaning, worthwhileness, something different from life, some inner source of life and of being happy, a weak word, and yet quite true. Since we were all born amongst sleeping people, since Papa and Mama and all the rest were asleep, we become infected by negative emotions. We inhale the atmosphere of those around us from birth, and people are negative and governed by negative emotions. So, in our acquired personality, we have formed in us a spurious center called the negative part of emotional center. At birth, the emotional center has no negative part. So, we acquire negative emotions. This is a blessed business. Because if negative emotions were born in the essential emotional center, we could never separate from them. That is the teaching, and you can see what it means if you reflect. The validity of being negative is not essential. It is a matter of the acquired personality, and so a disease. So you begin to see, perhaps after many years, what it means when it is said that we have a right not to be negative. This is a marvelous insight, a real awakening, a beginning of change of being. Now, when we take in and accept a negative impression of another person, it increases the strength over us of the negative part of emotional center. But not only that, it comes back on us. Namely, that representation of the person in us becomes negative. Each person we know exists in us as a representation, as well as outside us as an object of the senses. The external world is reflected in us through the senses via the nervous system, the nerves and their impulses, and represented in us as people, things. If you take in a negative impression of a person that you know well, that person in you becomes negative to you. For example, you say you love X. Then you see X and think how silly he is. X in you then becomes negative. You may have a nightmare about X, how he hates you and wishes to murder you. Why? Because you have murdered X in yourself. So taking in negative impressions of others increases second force in you. It increases enemies in you. It can become a serious matter in the work to take in negative impressions of others in the work. Now, if you have cleared a portico, a hall, a space in yourself by self-observation so that you can see a negative impression coming in and are able not to let it enter freely, not to identify with it, not let it go where it wishes, not say I to it, then you keep clear of the mechanical result of that impression. This is magic. This place is what all must make in their inner world. It is just as if we open the physical door in the external world and find an evil man and let him in, or shut the door and lock it. It is just the same thing in the internal world. But if we may not have made this clearing, this portico, not made doors and locks, we are at the mercy of outer life, having nothing in us to prevent its continual effect. But when you realize that outer life and people and things come in only as impressions via the senses, then if you have made this inner space or clearing in yourself, you can allow to enter and accept some of these impressions and reject others. This is taking impressions in consciously. This is called the first conscious shock, when a woman begins to be a man or woman for the first time, whatever they are mechanically in life. This is the beginning of being conscious man. Now, if you take in and accept the endless, jealous, envious, unhappy, and so negative impressions of events of daily life and other people, you are just a mechanical person, although you may be a general or prime minister. You are a function of life, driven by life. There is really nothing conscious in you. So the work says, you have no psychology. How can a machine have psychology? Said G. Machines are machines, some good, some bad. A man must begin to awaken before I can speak to him of psychology. As he is mechanical, whoever he is, I cannot speak to him. Psychology refers to real people. Ordinary people, people in life, who have been made by life, whoever they are machines. What psychology, he emphasized this word, can there be in relation to machines? For the study of machines, mechanics is necessary, not psychology. That is why we begin with mechanics. It is yet a long way to psychology. We begin with the study of the machine, of the man-machine, of the man who has the illusion he is not a machine.